Davidson of Ohio. So, Congressman, thank you so much for being back with us. First of all, just tell me, having sat there, asked those questions, gotten some answers, what'd you learn?
I thought it was a great hearing. I mean, we were able to talk to Chairman Powell about really from the pre-CARES Act, you know, the very first day when the government started shutting down, how important 13.3 was, you know, to the stability. I mean, there was literally no buy side. People forget that at this point. There was no buy side, whether you're talking municipal bonds. Oil didn't just go to zero, went to negative. So it's kind of a refresher on how important the Fed's emergency powers were there and kind of the limits of it. And then when you talk on the most relevant thing right now, the debt ceiling kept coming up as something that has to find a way to get done. But the point I made with Chairman Powell was, you know, whether it was in the private sector when he was a CFO or, you know, now as a, you know, top regulator for banks, when you extend credit, there's underwriting involved. And right now, there's not a plan to repay this debt. So it seems like if you want to raise the debt ceiling, there would be some level of underwriting. So how are you going to pay for it?
At the same time, you heard Secretary Yellen say she doesn't think the debt ceiling makes much sense at all. And her point, as I understood it, was, listen, you're Congress. You're the one who's voting to spend money. If you vote to spend the money, what sense does it make to say, we've voted to spend the money, but we won't let you borrow it in order to spend it?
Well, I think that was a little disingenuous by the Secretary. I mean, frankly, it used to be that the level of taxes were the check on the government, right? So if the people were only willing to be taxed at a certain level, the government was constrained to the level of taxation. Then they blew through that and said, well, we're only going to be constrained by the ability to borrow. And now we're not even constrained by the ability to borrow. Look at the Fed's balance sheet. They've got over $8 trillion on their books as the lender of last resort. So in a way, you know, kind of already monetized 8/29ths of the debt. You know, we have 29 trillion in debt. The only way for the government to continue to operate isn't to pay for it with current cash flow coming into the Treasury. They have to borrow to even operate the government. So there should be a conversation. And frankly, the executive branch by itself doesn't have the authority to just borrow. That's Congress's job.
Congressman, as I understand the argument, in part from the Republicans, from your side of the aisle, it's that, wait a second, you can't divorce the debt ceiling from what you want to spend with all this money on the Build Back Better plan. Yesterday, we heard a key Democratic senator, that is Joe Manchin of West Virginia, say, not 3.5 trillion, 1.5 trillion. By the way, that takes us inside of what we would pay for with increased taxes. Does that make you feel better about what they're talking about?
I was very excited by Joe Manchin's logic on that, his previous Wall Street Journal op-ed. And frankly, when that letter came out between him and Schumer, I was also encouraged that he was pushing to end the Fed's, you know, he referred to it as quantitative easing, but their asset purchases, $120 billion a month. So, you know, a lot of people see that for what it is. It's an economic distortion. It's creating artificial demand. And look, in 13.3 authority, that was vital. There had to be a buy side. Right now, it's just inflating markets.
Let's talk about something that you're a real expert on up there on Capitol Hill, and that is digital currencies, whether it's cryptocurrencies or a central bank digital currency. One of the things we heard yesterday was a flat-out question to Chair Powell, are you going to ban digital currencies? And as I understand the chairman, he said, no, we're not. Did that give you some cause for concern, or were you pleased with that answer?
Well, it was a good question by my colleague Ted Budd from North Carolina. And it was relevant because in the March hearing, last time Chairman testified before our committee, he basically implied that if we had a central bank digital currency, we wouldn't even need stable coins, and it might diminish the need for crypto. So that's really the source of the question. But of course, the Federal Reserve isn't the body that has clear jurisdiction over stable coins. That would really be, you know, the SEC potentially. And I think right now one of the concerns is at Treasury, not so much at the Fed, that they would treat all stable coins as securities. And of course, not all stable coins are. Some may be. I think there's a lot of speculation that Tether is effectively a money market fund at this point. So in the context, it really brings together what's going on in crypto and kind of the linkage to what we're all looking forward to late October, maybe November, when the Fed comes out with their white paper.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be watching that very carefully about central bank digital currencies. But on the sort of, if I can say it, nibbling around the edges of regulation, we have the SEC making some noises. Actually, Chair Powell specifically made the point about money markets and how some of these things look like that. Do you agree that they should be doing things, for example, on stablecoin, like making sure that, in fact, that there are reserves backing them up if they say that they're reserved?
Look, I think Tether is a time bomb, personally. I think there should be a lot of regulatory oversight on Tether. And there should be some level of transparency as what is the quality of the commercial paper that's there. They've disclosed it's there. I was encouraged to hear them say they didn't have Evergrande, for example. But they do have Chinese commercial paper. What's the quality of that? And people can't really assess it. I am concerned that the lack of action by Congress is leaving this just ripe for regulation by enforcement. And that scares off capital. And I think a lot of capital is fleeing the United States of America for, calmer pastures where they have more regulatory clarity.
And finally, Congressman, are you concerned at all, as some people say they are, that China might get ahead of us when it comes to central bank digital currency? Now, I'm not talking about cryptocurrency, but central bank digital currency. They clearly are really going for it hard. They are banning transactions in cryptocurrency. Is it possible they could get ahead of us, and would there be consequences potentially for the United States?
Well, look, the Chinese version, there are big consequences, because China's version of a central bank digital currency is really the creepiest surveillance tool developed. I mean, it brings together a central look into every single transaction. Who are the parties on both sides of the transactions? It's not a third-party doctrine where you have bank reporting requirements like you do in America. Literally, the Chinese Communist Party would see into that, and they're linking it to a social credit score that ties geolocation data, every piece of data they can collect on a person, which really says, are you a good citizen in the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party? I certainly hope that the United States has no interest in developing anything like that. What we should be using is true blockchain, distributed ledger technology, like Bitcoin has, where you have trust established in a different way, where you facilitate permissionless transactions in keeping with the civil liberties of our own country. It would be a shame to see us chase after an authoritarian regime like China.
Does that mean, to jump ahead a little bit here, as we look at central bank digital currency here, and I'm going to get over my skis here, that means we don't want an account-based system, we want basically a token-based, so that you can have transactions without the Federal Reserve knowing what the transaction is?
That's absolutely the only kind I would support. And one of the alarming things is the Bank of International Settlement in Switzerland, which is really the central banker to the central banks. They've been doing a lot of work in this space and have some white papers available for public right now. And it seems like they're laying the framework for this centralized system that is more compatible with what China wants to. And it really is, where is the future of money? Where's the future of central banking going? And I think America has to get moving so that we develop a system that enhances our culture and our values, not China's.
Including one of privacy, I think you would say. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really great to have you with us again. That's Congressman